Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartia, and in this special issue of TFI Newsroom for the Cloud Foundry Summit, today we have with us Julian Fischer, CEO and founder of Anynines. Julian, it's nice to have you back on the show.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you again.
Anynines is participating in the show, the summit. Can you please tell us about the talk that you will deliver at the event?
The talk is about how to integrate service brokers with Kubernetes operators. And the background of the talk is that Cloud Foundry makes steps towards Kubernetes. As you may have heard, there are opportunities nowadays to run Cloud Foundry on top of Kubernetes. And so imagine you have a Kubernetes environment and you decided to have a Cloud Foundry on top of that Kubernetes environment. It may also happen that you do have one or multiple Kubernetes operators taking care of data service lifecycle management. Well, whether this makes sense or not is a discussion that we should have another time, but let's just take for granted for now that there could be operators and people want to integrate these operators in a Cloud Foundry environment. Now, if you want to do that, you'll have to provide a service broker implementing the service broker API, and then register that with your Cloud Foundry environment. And in the talk, we're going into the details on how the service broker API looks like and what it means to integrate a Kubernetes operator using a service broker. What are the obstacles and what are the challenges?
Right. So, of course, there will be a lot to look into your code. But I also want to talk about, if you can, talk about some of the major challenges that either you or the customers face when it comes to service broker integration with Kubernetes operators.
Sure. Look, the overall challenge is that a Kubernetes operator presents a interface for the application developer using Kubernetes to create data service instances. The way operators work is that they provide two things in order to accomplish that. The first would be a custom resource definition, and the second would be a corresponding controller. So if you're talking to Kubernetes and, for example, you specify a stateful set, you create a specification on how the stateful set should look like. Well, often you make that as a YAML description file. For example, naming how many replicas you want in the stateful set and describing the pod template you want to be used when starting pods in the stateful set. Also specifying the persistent volumes and so on. So if we're dealing with data services, it is very likely that we are using stateful sets underneath. But we also have to express the data service specific settings. For example, whether, let's take Postgres for an example, whether you want to have Postgres 11 or Postgres 12 as your version. Now, what operators usually do is they provide a custom resource definition, which means that you teach Kubernetes a new data structure, a new kind, so to say, which could be called Postgres. And in the corresponding controller, you take the specification of such an object that users can now create. So you can create a Postgres object using the kubectl command, for example. And in the controller, this will be translated, this specification, let's say a Postgres object version should be 12, will be translated into a service and a stateful set, for example. So that will be the Kubernetes side of things. At the end of such an operator, Kubernetes application developers have the opportunity to write a specification, let's say for Postgres objects, that will then instantiate and generate corresponding services and stateful sets, so to say, implement the database service instance. Now, if you want to integrate that with Cloud Foundry, you have to provide, as I mentioned earlier, a service broker. Now, the question is, how do you do that? And the major challenge here is to provide a mapping between the information provided by the Cloud Foundry user and translate that into such an object specification that will be understood by the operator's controller to then translate this request into an actual data service instance. Now, there are some problems underway. One of which is that neither Kubernetes nor many operators do have a concept of a service binding. So, well, you have to find and bridge that gap somehow.
Awesome. Are you making any announcements at the summit?
Well, the entire ecosystem is moving towards more Kubernetes enablement, and so is the Anynines platform. So the first part of the announcement that we're making for the conference is that we are keeping the past Anynines.com, our public Cloud Foundry offering, up to date with recent updates, also expanding Kubernetes support, and of course, newer Cloud Foundry versions. I think that is of particular interest as Pivotal Web Service recently has announced its end of life, so that there are some public Cloud Foundry platforms that will be switched off in the near future. And if those applications need a new home, passanynines.com could be an alternative. The second part of our announcements is about the Anynines platform itself. Its Kubernetes products are being developed, and we are started to accept closed beta customers. So if you are interested in checking out those new modules, then feel free to reach out to us, and we can arrange an early preview. All these modules are basically about bringing Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes closer together, making application development much easier for clients. So this would be a Cloud Foundry based on Kubernetes, as well as the data services we currently have based on Bosch Virtual Machine Automation. They will come natively to Kubernetes as well. So don't miss the opportunity to check these out.
Right. And will you be presenting any demos or preview, or can people also jump in and get some hands-on experience with these or not during the summit?
Yes, during the summit we do demos. Currently they are on request. So if a client wants to talk about us, about this topic, then we arrange a demo and do the demo with the client.
Awesome. Can you also talk about Anynines, data services and on-demand provisioning of dedicated data services instances?
Yes. So in the past few years, building application platforms usually kept people pretty busy. So if an organization going down the path of digitalization decided to pick up an application development platform, they often take several months, sometimes even several years, to adapt their internal development structure and methodology to really, benefit from the reduced friction that, for example, a Cloud Foundry or Kubernetes offers. Now, over time, there's another effect kicking in, which is that applications, they do not live in a vacuum, and most applications aren't stateless. So somewhere you need to store state. And while modern database vendors also try to become more cloud native, they often carry a legacy of having a database that's not really made to be operated. Postgres is a wonderful example. It's a wonderful database, and within the open source community, maybe the feature richest relational database, at least there is. But at the same time, making these databases work within an application platform is quite challenging. And it's even quite challenging if you keep onboarding those data services with their commercial products, because those vendors also have the problem on how to make these things work in the cloud. And if you're buying, let's say, 10 different data services from 10 different vendors, even if they are cloud enabled somehow, you have and introduce a lot of heterogeneity into your platform. Now, as we've started developing our own platform that was publicly facing since 2013, we've learned that this is no option because you will be drowning in operational effort. So we've been looking for a solution that actually works across data services and provides both the application developer as well as platform operator with a homogeneous API to do lifecycle of both the automation, the platform operator, as well as service instances for the application developers. And this is how the Anynines data services came to life. As part of that journey, we thought about, is there a single paradigm on how automation should be done that covers everything from small instances for development and testing purposes to large production-grade systems? And the answer to that is yes, there is. It's the on-demand provisioning of dedicated service instances, which means that whenever an application developer requests the creation of a database, this database will be provisioned on demand, whether it is as a pod or a set of pods, such as within a stateful set in Kubernetes, or whether it is a set of virtual machines using Bosch. The service instance can comprise of a single pod, a single VM, or a cluster of pod or a cluster of virtual machines that will come together and work, for example, as a Postgres streaming cluster with asynchronous streaming replication. And similar for all the other data services. The user interface of all these data services, whether it's RabbitMQ, whether it's Postgres, whether it's MongoDB, or whether it's Elasticsearch, should be pretty similar. So creating a backup for Postgres should work similar for creating a backup, let's say, for Redis. And this is basically what the automation is about. And the underlying major paradigm here is the on-demand provisioning of dedicated instances, because you can create small single instances and large clusters with the same technical implementation. And the fact that they are dedicated means that you have a clear contract to the application developer. So let's say you're ordering a 3-node Postgres cluster with 16 gigabyte of memory each. This instance with its 3 nodes will be for you exclusively. If you, for example, take an application and max out this service instance, this will be your problem alone. It won't affect other neighbors through the solid isolation of virtual machines, or in a little, well, let's say, decreased manner, the isolated environment provided by pods and containers.
Awesome. What kind of use cases are you looking at with dedicated data service instances?
Well, if you happen to be an organization that has many developers, you want to reduce not only the friction to get an application up and running, but also to get the data services up and running. If you have an application that it requires a database, then you need to get the database up and running as well as the application. And the goal of all application developer platforms is to provide a toolset to the application developer that they'll push a button and can perform a cold deploy in the middle of the night if they have a wonderful idea or happen to be awake, and they shouldn't have to wait for any sysop or anything to do any manual labor. So whenever you happen to create or have to create a larger number of data service instances, and you don't have or don't want to make your DBAs do that on demand, you use an automated solution like the Anynines data services to do the heavy lifting for you. We have clients who operate thousands of data services across, the many data services we offer in those Cloud Foundry environments, and manage their life cycle using that automation with ease. So it's about operational and engineering efficiency in the end.
Okay, and if you can tell me, how does this all fit into Anynines overall offering, especially Anynines platform? Or in other words, how tightly integrated are these offerings that are coming from Anynines?
Our major subject in Anynines is the creation of application platforms using open source and leveraging open source technology. So we believe that if application developers want to use Cloud Foundry, you should give them a Cloud Foundry. If they want to use Kubernetes, like nowadays becomes more popular, we give them a Kubernetes. The data service automation is basically what makes this whole thing whole, or turns it into a turnkey solution. Because the printer is nothing worth without the ink. And our data service is the ink to the printer. So it's about storing applications and making them operable, as well as providing the data service so that application state can be stored. And this whole thing is being automated in a way that the operational effort to do that is kept to a minimum. If then the customer doesn't want to do that on its own, we even operate those things and those environments on behalf of them, making that a comprehensive solution. So the data servers are basically the building block. Take an application platform and turn it into a solution platform where applications true and real world applications can be maintained. So this whole thing comes together. The pricing model we offer is pretty simple and straightforward. So the point is that if a client has created such an environment, that the cost of making that platform bigger and bigger, it actually scales very shallow, so that you don't have to add much money per month if your application gets bigger. You're not punished for deploying many applications. You're not incentivized to have only few large application instances. That really doesn't matter.
Julian, today's word, as a journalist, I hear Kubernetes everywhere. But there are a lot of people who have investment in Cloud Foundry, and those are some large, deployments there. So first of all, what I want to know is, since Anynines is investing in both Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry, so can you talk about what kind of share looks like when it comes to Cloud Foundry users versus Kubernetes users? And I also don't want to make it Kubernetes versus Cloud Foundry, but just to get an idea of Cloud Foundry users there. And then second piece of question that I would ask separately would be that, what about those users who have heavy investments in Cloud Foundry? Are they being left high and dry because everybody is moving to Kubernetes, or they can continue with the investments they have made?
I mean, Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes is not a contradiction at all. As we've discussed in earlier sessions, Cloud Foundry has been redeveloping its own container orchestration several times, adding Kubernetes as the new prime standard for container orchestration is a natural evolution for Cloud Foundry. And Cloud Foundry still offers a higher level of abstraction than Kubernetes does. So it's never Cloud Foundry against Kubernetes. The question that keeps minds of Cloud Foundry users busy is more about BOSH versus Kubernetes, where BOSH is currently being used to deploy Cloud Foundry, and Kubernetes could be the way to go in the future. So if I look into our more recent clients that joined Anynines, I can say that it is very important for them that we have both a classic Cloud Foundry stack, as well as we help them to operate and maintain those stacks as long as they want to, as long as it is technical, meaningful, and possible. And on the other hand, show them a perspective on how to migrate those platforms towards Kubernetes. So by adding those modules to the Anynines platform, we still keep on delivering all those classic Cloud Foundry environments, and provide a path of migration if clients want to move over to Cloud Foundry over time. We are performing many tests internally to advise customers when it is the right time to do that. And in my humble opinion, the classic environments, for more heavyweight users where there are already a lot of applications and there's a lot of load and so on, a classic Cloud Foundry environment is still a perfect choice, and often even the recommended choice. And operating these environments is something that it can be quite a hassle. So the kinds of customers we see, they have one or two problems. The first problem is they're using Cloud Foundry based on its open source edition, but they kind of feel a struggle because they have only a limited number of platform operators within their companies, and it keeps them rather busy to deploy Cloud Foundry and keep it up to date, keep it secure. So these clients often migrate to the Anynines platform distribution because it's just much easier for them. We provide them with a solid release management, tested releases that they can download. And if they want us to operate that and perform these upgrades, we'll do that. That is a pain relief they are actually very happy with. Like the other side of the coin is those customers with commercial Cloud Foundry vendors. And I have to tell, we are not really charging for Cloud Foundry. What we are charging for is the solution as a whole, as well as the automation that ships with it, as well as the services we provide. So it's including support and often including a full remote management. So not to forget about the data services that is quite unique as an offering. So these other clients, they come from contracts that are often, in their opinion, very expensive and are happy to join Anynines to reduce costs, especially in these challenging times.
Right. There's one more question I have. You mentioned, there are a lot of customers, they get open source cloud. And if that is the case with any open source technology, you can get it, but open source solves only day one problem. You can download the code, compile it, start using it. But day two is where the real challenge happens. So when it comes to build versus buy of Cloud Foundry, what you did allude to that, but I just want to go a little bit deeper. How do you help customers where they can experiment with Cloud Foundry, but then they can also move to support where they can leverage in production as well?
It's all about the experience, right? I mean, if you think about Cloud Foundry and you take the challenges step by step, it's not a miracle. It's not something that requires superpowers or anything. I mean, people want to make you believe that, but in the fact, it's just solid work that's required. Now, the question is it economically viable for one organization to build that knowledge from scratch, like to operate a few Cloud Foundry environments? And it turns out to be that this is often not the case. They're either lacking of the right people, or they have problem with people turnover, or they have just too many responsibilities. So we have actually built a team over the years with people who are specialized on building these environments and keeping them alive. And that creates a level of experience which makes the progress of establishing such an environment much more efficient. So we have clients, they have, let's say, an urgent demand because management announced something like opening a new or building a new platform. It must be done within weeks. They could never they could never deliver a platform within a few weeks. So with us, this is no problem because it's just about guiding them through a well-trained sequence of questions. And this is not only about, which domain should the Cloud Foundry environment be operated? It's also helping them to navigate their own internal structures. So one example in larger organizations is security officers. They have a handbook, it's a few hundred pages. And if you don't know the internals of Cloud Foundry, and let's say one business unit is confronted with the security office, they will ask questions they not be able to answer right away. And it will take weeks until they get this environment in production. With our proven network layouts and the security questionnaires we have prepared, we're usually able to do that within a few days to a few weeks. So that it's not only about building the actual platform, but also enabling the organization to make the management decision and put this platform into production. It often makes a huge difference.
There's one more thing is that when we do look at open source, it moves at its own pace, whereas companies, they may need to move at their own pace. Second thing is, moving fast versus, as you mentioned, security of it moving slow to ensure security, it also becomes a big challenge. Also, third component is that when you do talk about Cloud Foundry, it's not just one Cloud Foundry. There are so many new technologies that keep emerging. I mean, CF is a good example. So your internal teams have to keep up with all these technologies. Plus, you have to juggle with all those different balls. So how do you make it easier for them so that business continuity is important for them? They don't want the business continuity to break. At the same time, they can leverage latest technologies without compromising on security as well. So how do you help them maintain their pace while leveraging all these technologies?
Well, I think that to be, let's say a bit joking, a lot in life is changing or making a decision and changing time with money, or the other way around. So I'll give you an example. My father and my grandfather, when they bought a car and they had to change tires, they went to their garage, took the spare tires and changed them. Now I happen to become a computer scientist and, let's say I'm a cliche of it. I don't change tires myself because I have two left hands. So what I do is I take my car to the place where the tires are stored, where there's a professional changing the tires in just 10 minutes or 20 minutes, while I would take hours to do so. Now, this is the same for organizations. If you can change your tires at your car, you can operate your own Cloud Foundry environment, you can try out the new whatever technology, but you have to invest the time and the passion. And you will only get good at it if you do that very often, very frequently. So the whole thing about being effective at something is to enable a group of people to have enough repetitions to become professionals. And then you get a level of efficiency that enables for us a business, but still is cheaper for our clients to go with us than to do it themselves. And this helps them to try out and evaluate new technologies much more efficient because they can try out whether it's something for them. If they don't want us to do that in a long term, they want to do it themselves, well, they're free to do so. It's not a lock-in in any way. So I would say that some companies, they have talented people. They don't know companies like us, and they don't need them. They can do that and pull those tricks off without us. But those who want to focus on their domain business, they will always have to make that decision on whether to change their tires themselves or whether to hand it over to professionals.
Julian, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about not only your talk, but also the technology that Anynines is building to help Cloud Foundry users to not only continue with their investment, but if they need, they can also easily migrate to Kubernetes. So once again, thank you for your time. I wish we could have done it in person like we did last time, but online is not that bad. So once again, thank you.
And thank you again for having me here. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And I wish we can meet at the next conference face to face again. So let's hope for the best.